Aaron, I just sent you a chat on an administrative matter that I wanted your opinion on. So.
All right, we are on YouTube. You are all set to go. Thank you so much.
Okie dokie. Good morning, everyone. I want to formally welcome you to the MAPC Executive Committee meeting on Wednesday, September 20th, 2023. The Executive Committee meeting is being conducted remotely via Zoom, obviously. That's why we're all here, consistent with Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. This includes an extension until March 31st, 2025 of the remote meeting provisions of former Governor Baker's Executive Order of March 12th, 2020, which suspends the requirements of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. To provide public access to the meeting while limiting the potential for abuse for video conferencing technology, members of the public may view the proceedings at youtube.com/user/MAPC Metro Boston. And you can also see past video on that platform as well. So I just wanted to quickly welcome you in case you missed the last meeting or have not had a chance to read the minutes yet. I'm back sitting as president until it's noted elsewhere, until the body of the council feels otherwise or votes otherwise. So you have not been transported back a year. I'm here. I'm just here to facilitate these meetings and to assist with our operations. And with that, I am going to start the meeting by opening the roll. So if everyone could come off mute, I'm going to just take the roll. I want to apologize in advance if I mispronounce your last name or first name. Just let me know in a direct message how to pronounce it if I mispronounce it, and I will do better next time. Okay? All right, here we go. First up. Ayu?
Present.
Okay. Colette up front?
Present and properly pronounced. Thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad. My French mother would be pleased. Great. Kirk Bellevant? Karen Canfield?
Present.
Jen Constable? Tom Daniel? And if you couldn't come off mute quick enough, just pop it in the chat. No big deal. Okay. Tom Daniel, sorry I interrupted you. John DePriest. Thomas Galliani.
Present.
Mo Handel.
Here.
Diego, I don't think is Sagoon. Jerry Johnson. Tabor Keeley.
Here.
Angie Liu is not. Gina Martinez.
Here.
Steve Olenoff.
Yeah.
Courtney Rainey. Vandana Rao. Claire Richter. Sam Seidel.
Here.
Steve Silvera.
Present.
Juan Vega.
Present.
Elaine Vanya. And me, Erin Wortman, here. Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Next up on the agenda is the approval of minutes from August 16th, 2023.
Aaron,
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Mark?
I wonder if I might do a couple of very quick administrative items first. Is that all right?
Certainly. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. A couple of administrative items and one introduction. Claire Ricker did reach out to indicate she could not be present at today's meeting, so we did know that she's excused, representing the town of Arlington. Since he's not on, I'm going to note that Shagun's name is pronounced Shagun, or when he sometimes does come on. And also, there is a little bit of an unusual administrative and voting matter that Aaron and I have discussed and which I want to inform you of. Yesterday, we received an email from Adam Chapdelaine, who I think has now begun as executive director of the MMA. Is that right? Yes. And he has resigned his immediate past president voting position on the executive committee, in addition to having previously resigned as president. It became apparent to Lizzie and I shortly before I went on vacation about 10 days ago that he had this other role. Once he resigns as president, he becomes a voting member of the executive committee by virtue of being the immediate past president. And we discussed that with him because of his position at the MMA. He did not want that. And so in light of that has resigned with words of continued encouragement and support for MAPC's work and this board. Since Aaron is normally the immediate past president, this creates the very unusual circumstance for Keith Bergman, which Keith is not aware of, that he is now the immediate past president and is therefore eligible to vote at these meetings. So if that's all right with you, Keith, it's all right with me and Aaron, and it's the way we're interpreting the statute. So,
well, I'm sorry that we have to lose people in order for that to happen, but I will be the immediate past president. Sounds like twice removed. So
yeah, something like that. Right.
Thank you.
We also have a new director at MAPC who has joined us in this meeting, Javier Gutierrez, who is our new director of community engagement. And I wanted to give Lizzie an opportunity to welcome him to this meeting.
Thank you, Mark. I'm going to actually turn it over to Javier to introduce himself, but I just wanted to let folks here know we are so excited to have Javier join us. He started as our new community engagement director. I feel like it was just a little over a week ago, but he has already jumped in on so many different projects. I keep joking he is going to be the single most caffeinated person at MAPC because every single one of our directors and other staff people have reached out to get coffee with him. But he has, an incredible work history, which he'll talk a little bit about, working with a little bit with cities and towns on the local level, working at the state level. And we're just thrilled to have him jump in and be able to lead our community engagement team. So Javier, I'd love to give you a moment to introduce yourself to our executive committee. You're on mute, Javier.
There
Welcome
we
to
go.
Zoom
I need another cup of coffee. Well, thank you, Mark and Lizzie, for the introduction, and it is a pleasure to be here in space with all of you. Again, my name is Javier Gutierrez. I bring into the space over 15 years of community engagement experiences, and at the same time, I bring into this space over 10 years of really implementing racial equity programs in large city institutions, such as, in my case, such as the Department of Public Health and the Boston Public Health Commission. So with that in mind, I'm very excited to be here. I look forward to learning from this space and perhaps in some ways, somehow collaborating, getting to know everybody in this space. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Javier. And Aaron, I turn it back over to you. Thank you for indulging me on those administrative matters.
Well, it was all good news. So welcome. And Keith, welcome back. Ish. You didn't really leave, but
Thank you.
welcome to voting again. Happy to have you. So next up on the agenda, or back on the agenda, is the approval of minutes from August 16th, 2023. Are there any suggestions, changes? Okay, good.
Aaron, does this go to the end of the meeting, this item?
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
So
Move adoption.
just a clarification, we don't need them. I just want to make sure, because not that I wasn't paying attention when Adam was doing this, consent agenda is different for me. So we just need to, we don't need a motion, right, to put on the consent agenda. I can just put it on the consent agenda, correct? So if that's okay with everyone,
Yeah, we'll take a single motion at the end for the consent agenda.
Yes. So
Okay.
if there are no changes, we're just going to put that in the back end and put it on the consent agenda. And at that time, I will ask for a motion. So since there are no changes, we're going to move on to the treasurer's report, financial statement of June 2023. And I'm going to call on Sam, Treasurer Sam.
Thank you, Aaron, and welcome back, and welcome to Javier as well. Sam Seidel, treasurer. I am actually out in the country right now. I have 7 geese outside that window right there. So if you hear geese in the background, that's what that is. We are looking at June 2023, the income statement for that month, which you should have all received by email. June closes out our fiscal year. So basically these numbers tell the story for last year's fiscal year. And as I'm sure you all recall, the basic story of last year was, there's some geese right there. The basic story of last year was our overhead rate. We started at an overhead rate of 118 about mid-year. We decided we needed to up the overhead rate to 121. And basically that's what we've been tracking the whole time. And that's really been the most important numbers that we've been following. And as you can see from this report, which closes out the fiscal year, from the period July to January of last year, we ended up with an overhead rate of 118.6. And then starting in February through June, we ended up with an overhead rate of 121.1. So these numbers are excellent. The 0.6 and the 0.1 are, I'm not a lawyer, but I think they are de minimis. Anna said she has no concerns about those extra 60 basis points in the first case and 10 basis points in the second case. So that's all very good news. I'll just bring your attention to a couple of other numbers just on the sheet, just to help you tell the story. One of the things that happened was we changed our overhead rate mid-year, and then we kept running a lower overhead rate. And whenever I would ask Anna about this, she would always say, don't worry, there are a lot of expenses that come in June, and those will bump up our overhead rate for the second half of the year. And sure enough, if you look at total administrative expenses for the month of June, you'll see that we were at 105%. So a lot of items that were sitting out there all year come due at the end of the year, and we pay those out. And that put us at an overall overhead rate for the month of June of 137.9%, which is really pretty high, but it's actually exactly what we needed to get us to 121% cumulative for the period February to June. So that's very good news. The only other number that I'll pull out of the sheet is our net income increase to fund balance at the end of the year is 122,875. So that is money that will go into the fund balance. It's less than our budgeted number, but at the end of the day, it's a positive number, which is what we care about. And it will go and be available for any emergency items or other items that come up at any time. There's nothing else in here I particularly want to point out. And so that concludes the treasurer's report. Open to any questions, comments, thoughts, etc.
I see Mark with his hand. Oh, okay. Let's do Mark and then Amai. Mark, go ahead.
I just want to thank Sam and particularly Anna and the finance staff, as well as all of our directors and managers for really paying attention to the overhead issue after a very tough July and August of last year. Not this year, last year. We had overhead rates going as high as 200%. And at the end of the day, with the slight increase in the approved overhead rate that we adopted mid-year, we were aiming to come out to an annual final overhead rate of 119.25. And as you can see, we ended up at 119.6. It is always better to be a little bit over than to be under, because when you're over, it might push you toward deficit, but when you're under, you might have to actually pay back money to the federal government. So 119.6 is very, very good result. It took an enormous amount of effort and creativity to get there, and hard work billing to projects, which is always the best way to prevent the overhead rate from going sky high. So a big thank you to the finance team and the directors for managing through this.
Great, thank you, Mark. And agree. Am I?
Oh, thank you. And I would echo Mark's appreciation on that, and particularly Sam and folks for helping me understand just what goes into that overhead rate and how it's used. So another question for my education is, Sam, I know you pointed out that the actual increase to fund balance is still a positive number, and that's great. However, it is still about a quarter or so of what the projected number was going to be. And just for, to understand, want to understand like why that is, why it was the, where the difference came from, and are there any ramifications to that we should be concerned about going forward?
Well, I'm going to actually kick this over to Mark and Lizzie to go more in depth here. But my overall take on the budget, particularly as you get to year end, is you start the whole process with a certain number of expectations. It just to my eye, and to be perfectly frank, I didn't ask about this number particularly, but if you look in the current month column, you'll see that the monthly budget number for increase to fund balance is $35,000. That seems like a lot to me. And I think that was just a budgeted number that got put in to help us fill out the budget overall so we could have something to vote on. When you add that up over 12 months, you get to 428,000 and change. But I'm actually going to kick this over to Mark and Lizzie to offer some more specifics on the final number that we ended up with.
The only thing that I would say, and Lizzie or Anna, I don't know if Anna's on the screen actually.
Yeah, she is.
Okay, might have to add here. But the only thing I would say is that normally we end up with a surplus of more like 50, 60, 70,000. 122,000 is actually high. It's true, it wasn't as high as what we projected in the mid-year budget, but I actually think it's a better number. Having a $500,000 surplus in 1 year, I think draws unneeded attention to us by outside parties. So I think this is a very reasonable number. I'm happy with it. If anything, it's a little bit on the high side of what we seek to have as net income and increase to fund balance on an annual basis. Anna, Lizzie, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I'd just like to add a couple of things. I think what's kind of confusing folks here is the fact that we have a net income increase in the mid-year update of 428,253. But if you look at the footnote below, a big portion of that was to be carried into FY24, meaning that we were going to do the rest of that work in FY24.
No.
So if you look at the footnote, our projected fund balance was only going to be 52,275, and we are actually, more than doubling that to the 122. Does that answer your question, Nimai?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Great. Are there any other questions? Mark, do you have anything else to say, or is your hand just up?
Uncharacteristically, I do not have anything else to say. Oh.
Great. Just wanted to double check with your hand being up. Okay, great. Any other questions or comments on the treasurer's report? Great. Perfect. Ellen, you are free to stop sharing. Thank you. And this is going to be part of the consent agenda at the end with the minutes from August 16th. Okay, great. So next up on the agenda is the executive director's report.
I would appreciate it if someone could put maybe Ellen could put the executive director's report on the screen.
Right.
Ellen, are you able to do that?
Yes.
Okay, and then you may have to sort of scroll down with me.
I'll do my best.
You'll have the control there. I won't. So, all right. So, as Lizzie and Anna Sengupta know, the last couple of days have been arts and culture days for me. I've been traveling with Annis and her team around the region on some of our events, and it's really just amazing and incredible. Yesterday, we did an event with Mass Creative in Roxbury on the Creative Spaces Preservation Act. Senator Miranda was there, Chair Cahill was there, and many members of the community and leaders of the artistic and cultural world from throughout Massachusetts. We have had an aim, Lizzie and I both, with the assistance of both government affairs and arts and culture, to move more aggressively into the policy advocacy space in the arts and culture field. I would say that in the past couple of years, we really saw that change in the food arena as well, thanks largely again to government affairs and to Heidi Stucker at public health. And now we wanted to also beef up our activities in the arts and culture world. And yesterday's event in Roxbury was certainly an indication that that is moving forward, and the substantive role that MAPC played in helping to draft that legislation, in supporting it on the Hill, testifying on behalf of it the day before yesterday, and then holding the event with Mass Creative yesterday are all good symbols of that. In the evening yesterday, I was in Salem, where the arts and culture team was assisting with a public art procurement process. And we heard from 4 artists competing for the right to celebrate the life of Charlotte Fortin at Charlotte Fortin Park in Salem. People should know, if you don't already, that Margie Weinberger, our chief counsel, worked very closely with the Inspector General's office and our arts and culture team to develop what is now a statewide recognized 30B compliant process for procuring public art in our cities and towns, which we have used in Lynn, which we're now using in Salem and testing out in other communities. And it was really wonderful to see those lovely artistic presentations and to hear the community actively engaged, both on the screen and in person, in talking with the artists. And eventually they will actually be voting on which element will become a reality in the park. I don't think Annis is on the screen now, but I just wanted to take this opportunity to really congratulate her and her team. You know, we had a few teams shortly after the pandemic. Economic development, led by Angela Brown, was one of those that essentially lost almost all of their staff. And Annis has worked very hard with her assistant director, her new assistant director, Hannah Gaffman, to rebuild that team, to reclaim that space, and to do a tremendous amount of work in this field, informed by what happened during the pandemic, but also reclaiming some of the activities that we had to pause on during that point in time. And I just wanted to congratulate her and thank her for that one. So if we can move on now. If you just gradually scroll down, I think the next item I want to talk about is in data services. A lot of tremendous work going on in data services, but I particularly wanted to note that we are moving forward on the digital equity front, where, as you know, we have major grants and are doing a tremendous amount of work. We have recently been hired by the city of Gloucester, now joining the cities of Somerville, Quincy, and with our partners at NEMCOG, the greater Lowell area, for the development of digital equity plans. And we are also moving forward in a wide variety of other areas to expand digital capacity, hardware and software, to connect areas of the state and of our region that are not connected. We can move on. I'm not going to say something about every department. You can read some of those. Let's continue to move on. Yes, if we could pause there a moment. I think people a little bit higher up under the last housing element of fair housing. If we could go, that's it right there. So I think people are very much aware of all the work we're doing in MAPC or in MBTA MAP. Let's try that for a 4th time, Mark. MBTA communities zoning. But what people might be less aware of is that we have really begun to scope out an area in terms of helping to support communities in their fair housing work. which is very important to me and Lizzie and very important to the housing team. We did an Arlington plan back about a year ago, and we're now doing the Fair Housing Plan in Chelsea. And we hope to do more of these as well. There is a focus not only on getting the plans done, but helping communities to figure out the follow-up activities that they can use to engender more fair housing compliant activities in their communities with greater opportunities for BIPOC residents, newcomers, and other protected classes. That is really, really important work for us to do, both for our housing objectives and our equity objectives. And I am very glad that the housing team is moving forward with those efforts. I want to move to the very next item, which is the Shannon Grant Summerfest that took place back maybe about a month ago. We've had, as you know, the Shannon basketball tournament for years and years and years. And it was always very successful and people had lots of fun. But we noticed two difficulties. One difficulty was that it was bringing in an overwhelmingly large percentage of boys, not girls. And secondly, that it was really not bringing in the younger youth that we really try and engage in the program. And under the leadership of Rosemary Valinsky on Amy Riley's staff and municipal collaboration, we were able to completely recast that event this year into an overall Summerfest that was really focused on younger people and that had equal participation by boys and girls. Many communities were involved. I think that if I recall correctly, Lizzie, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, on the basketball front, there was a bit of a Cambridge dominance over many years.
For a very long time, yes. And then
yes,
this year.
Which was dissuading certain other communities from participating actively. And so they did participate actively this year. Many more sports and other activities were involved. And the feeling and the spirit in the room was really amazing. And there was an all-city basketball skills challenge held, which was won this year by the city of Everett. Congratulations, particularly to Rosemary, for that effort. And if we can move along. Okay, we're going to talk about the 60th anniversary a little bit later. I-90 Corridor Plan Grant. Thanks to EEA and Kurt Gartner, we got fully funded. $150,000 two-year grant to pilot a new program of developing priority areas in individual municipalities for development and preservation. We did this work extensively under the Patrick administration. There was somewhat less interest in it under the Baker administration. And we're pleased now with the signal from the Healy administration that it will once again be valuable for us to proactively plan with our communities specific parcels for development, the type of development they need, and specific parcels for preservation. We are kicking that off in Framingham, Natick, Newton, Watertown, and Wellesley. We have had interest expressed from 2 other communities. We will see if we can work them into the grant or if we do them in a later grant. There was a time that about 2/3 of our communities had gone through this process, but it's been a decade since that happened. And it's time to do this work again. We're not going to be doing it in exactly the same way. Eric Hove is leading this project. There will be some new processes that Eric and the folks in data services will develop for selecting, identifying, and programming these sites with our municipal partners. But a large part of the work that we do to implement Metro Common actually occurs on the ground in terms of what gets preserved, what gets rehabbed, what gets built, and where. And in order to do that, you can't just talk region-wide. You have to go down to parcels in individual cities and towns. And that's the place where we're trying to bring Metro Common onto the ground to influence the work that actually happens in individual communities. Very happy to see that moving forward.
Could I just make a comment, Mark?
Of course.
Thank you. This is Vandana Rao from EEA. I would strongly encourage your team as they're digging into and interacting with these 5 towns to consider a couple of aspects of water resources. One is that with PFAS and other type of constraints in these communities that we're already hearing about, not that necessarily that may be a constraint on growth, but those type of considerations will need to be taken as these communities are looking to grow and expand their development. And there are many options of actions that can be taken to sort of live within their existing permits, allocations, registrations, etc., and or try to find new sources. But those considerations should be kept in mind as we're looking to grow. So that's one. And I only say that because although it may seem obvious to many of us that those types of considerations should of course be taken, many communities may not necessarily, the planning arm of the in a local community may not necessarily always be in sync with their water department or what's going on their water availability side. And secondly, in particular light of lots of recent high precipitation events, we really want to avoid development in those areas that have been highly vulnerable to flooding within the 100-year floodplain, or even those that may not be in the delineated floodplain, but have experienced serious flooding in the past. So I would strongly encourage, as we're looking at these communities, to avoid having the pressures of vulnerabilities within the new development that may occur in the wrong places, as you put it, but really pushing them into areas that, put them out of harm's way. So these two, from a water resource perspective, is really important to us at EEA, and we want to make sure that as we are helping our communities to develop, they're really taking these up front and center as part of their considerations.
Vandana, I don't know if Eric is on the screen today. I'm looking at the document, so I only see a few faces. Since I haven't heard Eric pipe up, he's probably not on. Lizzie and I will discuss this with Eric. I know that we always take water constraint issues seriously, and we'll take them into account in our work here this year as well. I would be less than honest if I didn't say that there are many communities which seem endlessly willing to proceed with high-value commercial and retail development that magically develop water constraints as a reason why they can't house more people. And we need to be cautious about that as well. But there are real constraints, and we need to recognize what those real constraints are from both a climate perspective, from a water supply perspective, from a wastewater perspective, now from the perspective of PFAS contamination. And those all need to be legitimately taken into account in our planning process.
Thanks, Mark. I look forward to coordinating with Eric then.
Yeah. If I could ask Ellen to move down, I think that might be it. Yes. I will only say that there is normally at the end of the director's report a list of new staff. We didn't include that this month, but there are lots of new staff. Javier is only one of our multiple new wonderful people who are on board, and we'll make sure to include that next month. Any questions? Glad to answer anything. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark. Really appreciate it. Next up on the agenda is the Legislative Committee report. Legislative Chair Keith Bergman, also an immediate past president. You have the floor.
Thanks very much, Madam President. I hope all of this returning presidents to office isn't catchy at other levels of government, though. So, did I say that? All right. The Legislative Committee has met and will be reporting out at our next executive committee meeting with some recommendations that we have on some specific legislation. In the meantime, given that there's an awful lot of other things going on, I want to hand it over to do I see Leah on the call somewhere?
Yes. Hi,
Oh,
Keith.
there at the bottom right. All right, there on my corner. All right, very good. So hand it over to our Government Affairs Director, Leah Robbins. Thanks so much, all. And it's good to be back.
It's good to see everyone today. After a very quiet August, the legislature is ramping up to full speed in a lot of different crazy ways. The government affairs team has been up on Beacon Hill a lot in the past just 2 weeks alone, testifying on a number of priority legislation that this committee has endorsed. The arts and culture legislation that Mark mentioned. I'll be up later today testifying on procurement related legislation, healthy incentives program. There's been some transportation hearings. Pretty much many of the areas that we've been working on are coming up, and we're expecting to see a lot more hearings in the coming weeks. And we are working to bring municipal voices to those conversations with legislators as well. So that's a big push, along with bringing as many departments as we can. I was talking with Georgia the other day. I think we've got almost every department at MAPC having gone to a hearing for legislation that they have helped bring to this body for consideration. So we're really trying to showcase the expertise within MAPC and bring that depth of knowledge to the State House. So that's been really exciting to keep that going, because as you guys know, all of the committees have to wrap their work by middle of February for Joint Rule 10. So all hearings will be conducted by then. And then I'm sure they will give themselves extra time for consideration on voting out a few of them. But we expect a lot of the legislative activity in terms of hearings to happen before then. Couple of bills in motion. And I'll give a high level overview. I'm going to turn it over to Georgia to fill in a little more details. The governor filed a supplemental budget earlier this month, and that is a usual thing that we see happen as sort of at the end after the fiscal year is closed. There's one more supplemental budget to fill in the remaining gaps of what the funding pieces are and where the needs are. And no surprise for anyone who's been reading the papers that one of the big areas that's receiving funding in the supplemental budget proposal from the administration is the shelter system, which is dealing with so many more families than it has dealt with in recent memory. So we're working on a letter to House and Senate leadership regarding some of the impacts that we're seeing across the region. And Georgia has been doing a lot of work coordinating amongst MAPC communities and with our partners to make sure that we are communicating what we're seeing across the region. So Georgia, I'm going to turn over to you to share a little bit more about that supplemental budget, if that's okay.
Yeah. So as Leah said, the supplemental budget really focuses, the bulk of that funding would go to support this housing crisis, shelter crisis that we're in. It's looking at allocating $250 million to support shelter operations and accompanying social services that are required by this influx of particularly migrant families. That funding can be used to support school, healthcare, a variety of pieces, and it's something we know is really critical and should move fast. Currently, the state has about 6,500 families in shelter sites across the Commonwealth in about 75 different municipalities, although we know that number is growing on a daily basis, and we expect to see that number continue to rise. Just as some background, the National Guard has been brought in to support those shelter sites, and we know that those costs are going up. So for us, this shelter funding is really critical so that we can continue to serve families in a welcoming and supportive way and provide those resources that we know are critical to their success.
Thanks, Georgia. We're also in a bit of anticipation mode at the moment. We are hoping to see a housing bond bill from the administration in the coming weeks or months. Who knows exactly when it will come out? But we're really excited. Bond bills come up usually every 5 years on different topics ish. And there are a number of different funding programs that MAPC advocated for in the last housing bond bill. We're really looking forward to working with the administration and with many of the legislators who filed housing bills that we're supportive of to see what we can get included in a final package. As you all know, housing bond bill is often a chance to advocate for lots more money for different programs and then continue the conversation with the administration afterwards to see what's realistic to actually get funded under our bond cap. Because the legislature will historically ask for far more money than we could ever actually realize under our bonding authority. And then there's usually an opportunity to pursue some legislative changes that will make a real impact as soon as they're signed. So that's something we're watching very closely and have been great to bring the housing department and municipal voices to those conversations to think about where we're able to make some real headway. That's on one foot. Some of the things that are happening, there's lots more as well. If there's anything that you are particularly excited about in your community, please let me know so we can make sure it is on our watch list as well. And with that, I will turn it over for any questions.
Actually, Leah, I just wanted to add just like a few more pieces. I just wanted folks around this table to be aware. So, Georgia was talking about the shelter funding priorities that we're trying to push inside the supplemental budget. But we are actually doing a lot of work at MAPC around emergency assistance to new arrivals, doing a lot of coordination work with our cities and towns around these issues, particularly around some of the school issues that have come up. And then trying to help out. We have for many years coordinated the Massachusetts Immigrant Support Network, and we are continuing to coordinate with local municipal staff who are kind of doing this work on the ground at the local level, and sort of there's the myriad of issues that come up related to public health, related to services for new arrivals families. Those are all kind of connected to some of these sheltering questions. So we're doing a lot of that work. Georgia is our point person, so she is managing a lot of hats at the agency on these issues, but the departments that are involved are our public health team and our municipal collaboration team with particular involvement from Beth Robert, who runs our emergency preparedness work. So I just wanted to give like a very brief overview to let folks know about that. And then the last thing, which I think Leah forgot to mention, was that we are also planning our municipal conference with the Division of Local Services. Registration for that conference is open. It is on October 10th. It's going to be a really great day. The Lieutenant Governor will be there. We're having a secretariat panel. Maybe we can drop a link to the save the date and registration information, but we would love to have all of you join us.
Great, thank you, Leah and Lizzie. Imai, I see your hand up.
Hi, Lizzie, thank you for bringing up all the additional things you folks are doing with migrants. We touched on it at the LegCom, so I was hoping you'd touch on it some more here. I was going to ask somebody to do that if you didn't. And I just want to say I really appreciate how much you guys are putting into this. I think it's of national importance that Massachusetts sets an example that, we are a state, and in fact, we are a nation that can address an immigrant crisis, that we can do it humanely, and that counters all the people who say we can't, because that's just a falsehood. There's no reason a country as wealthy as this shouldn't be able to take care and handle migrant population from that we unfairly profit off of. And I'm sorry, I won't stump on this too much, but I feel it's really important, and I really appreciate the work you guys are doing to do it, because I know it's hard. I know it's probably easy to ignore, but I also know that it is the example it can set is huge and necessary right now. So thank you.
Thank you so much for saying that, Imai. I think we feel exactly the same way. And I just, with your permission, I'd love to convey some of that to our staff who are working on it. It's also, like you said, it's very emotional work as well. But I think we feel privileged to be able to have the resources and the team here who can actually really bring a lot to bear on this and help our cities and towns, help the residents and new arrivals who are coming. And I will say, by and large, most of our communities have really opened their doors and stepped up in every way that they can. And it's been kind of a wonderful thing to see.
I would ask Imai when he's declaring for the state legislature, because we could use him up there. The staff has been doing incredible work on this issue. across multiple departments at MAPC, but also across multiple departments at the administration, which makes it more challenging. It's challenging for the folks in the administration who are trying to deal with this issue because these are very much cross-departmental issues. We are going to have a tough time in the legislature on the funding we need. The appetite to support this issue is, it's not non-existent, but it's limited. And it's more difficult in one branch than it is in the other. But it's not easy in either branch. There are two falsehoods that we need to address in this debate. One is that the only people in shelter are migrants. We need to care deeply about the people in shelter who are migrants, but they are not the only people who are in shelter. The shelter crisis is also caused by our housing crisis and by the fact that the eviction ban is over, and by the fact that student loans have to be repaid, and by all the other things that are happening that are forcing people to lose their homes. The second thing that people need to deal with or recognize is that just because you don't provide shelter to a migrant family does not mean that the migrant family doesn't show up in Massachusetts. Good. I don't know if someone is commenting or if someone is on there. I think it was Tom, but he now muted himself. Maybe not quite as many show up, but most of them will show up anyway. It is, a result of many large forces, much more substantial than whether or not there's $200 million in the SUP or $250 million in the SUP. And we need to get the truth out about that, because I think the dominant perspective that a lot of legislators are hearing from a limited number of their constituents who have loud voices is, we don't want these migrants in Massachusetts and you're incentivizing them to come, so just stop. On the housing bond bill, the news is considerably better. This is going to be a great housing bond bill. The folks at the new Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, I hope you will pass this back, Elaine, have been doing a tremendous amount of great work on this bill. We have been briefed on the preliminary outlines of the bill, which are not yet public. I think it is extremely strong. Lizzie and Leah and I had an opportunity to meet with Secretary Augustus 2 days ago and had a long conversation about the individual elements of the bill. You should know that one area not currently covered in the bill that we will probably be pushing for hard, but respectfully, is money for the decarbonization and resilience in existing structures. It always seems like there's a great deal of talk about making new structures fossil fuel free. But the reality is that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, most of the housing stock will be the buildings that are already constructed. And a lot of them need rehabilitation, conversion, improvement, and there's very little funding to do that. It would be great to make sure that existing programs can be used for that, but it would also be great. This is a significant enough issue that if we're going to meet our climate goals, we should create a program that is specifically focused on decarbonization and resilience of existing structure. And not necessarily only residential, but certainly residential. So we are probably going to be pushing on that. I think some of the climate first activists in the legislature may also be pushing on that issue. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you. Jared, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna one, echo what Iman said, but also to Mark's point. I think perhaps one of the ways to really help both on the on addressing the migrant issue and addressing housing is just continue to make the point around competitiveness, right? I mean, I think there's been a lot of talk about competitiveness and sort of what impact the state's taxes, or I think more accurately the narrative around our taxes are. But I think clearly the cost of housing is a major impediment to the region's competitiveness, and so I think both sort of talking about the need to really be bold on housing and on on being able to support the migrants is critical for competitiveness when we think about how many businesses are either closing or aren't able to expand or having to shorten hours because they're not able to find because they're not able to find employees, and that's both a factor of not having housing, and just the fact that as folks move into different positions, there's clearly a need for folks in sort of entry level and in service sector jobs. So I think that's another sort of clear one case to make, but also just really pushing back on certain kinds of certain threats to competitiveness that I think are not really wound up or not really bound in reality, and then also to that could hurt our ability to make these investments that we really need to make. So thanks.
Thank you, Jared. Elaine. Elaine, we can't hear you, or at least I can't hear you. You gotta yell really loud. Yep.
So,
well, how about this, Elaine? You can add your comments in the chat whenever you sign back on. Okay, great. Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. Thank you so much, legislative, for that legislative update. Really appreciate it. Okay, next up on the agenda is the project update, a Metro West Climate Equity Project. Mark, are you going to be the first?
Could I ask Lizzie to introduce Claire?
Okay. Yeah, Lizzie, will you please introduce Claire?
I'm very glad to do that. Everyone, I'm very excited today to have Claire Hoffman from our public health team do our project update on the Metro West climate equity work. The project has been going on for a while. Claire's going to talk a little bit about some of the milestones and the goals of the project. We actually just recently hit a milestone with it. It has also had some interdepartmental aspects. So I'm hoping I haven't seen her presentation, but I'm hoping she'll talk a little bit about that as well. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Claire to do our project update today.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction, Lizzie. I'm Claire Hoffman. I'm a senior public health planner in the public health department here. And as Lizzie said, I'll be talking about the Metro West Climate Equity Project. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can people see that? Okay. Okay, great. So just to give some background on the Metro West Climate Equity Project, it's a project that the Public Health Department has been involved in since 2021, and it continues today. And it's a partnership between the municipalities of Ashland, Natick, and the city of Framingham. And it really focuses on this intersection of climate change and equity. All of those municipalities have recognized that climate change will have unequal impacts and want to support residents who will be hit hardest by climate change. And those tend to be folks living in environmental justice communities. So there have been several phases of the project, and the first phase was funded by an MVP action grant. And the goals have been to build lasting relationships with residents of Metro West environmental justice communities, to learn from them about how they're experiencing climate change impacts and what priorities they have for what actions their municipalities should take. And then to increase city and towns' capacity to engage environmental justice communities around the topic of climate equity. So these kind of are the priority neighborhoods that we've been working with. The areas that are highlighted white represent environmental justice communities. So you can see that most of Framingham is now considered an environmental justice area, and the western part of Natick is. Not shown on this map, but all of Ashland is also considered an environmental justice area. And I'm sure this is a term that you're all familiar with by now, but these neighborhoods are more likely to be home to residents of color, lower income households, and people who are non-native English speakers. So for this project, we really took a community-driven planning approach. And the definition of that is the process by which residents of vulnerable and impacted communities define for themselves the challenges they face and the solutions most relevant to their unique assets and threats. So the way that we kind of actualized this approach was by partnering with what we call climate liaisons. And these climate liaisons were residents of environmental justice neighborhoods in Ashland, Natick, and Framingham. They had an interest already in climate equity. They had networks that they could activate around climate equity, and they were compensated for their time by us. And we partnered with different community-based organizations in those 3 municipalities to recruit the community liaisons to the projects. One of our most successful partnership has been through the English as a Second Language program in Framingham, and they referred a lot of folks to the project, which is really great because one of the goals is to increase language access around climate and climate change in the municipalities. So I will just give a brief overview of the project timeline, but I really want to focus the remainder of the presentation on what we've been doing this year. But the climate liaisons have been really integral in kind of this data collection process that happened in 2022. So they conducted and helped design a survey where they asked their friends, families, and neighbors how climate change has been impacting them and what they would need to feel more resilient in the face of climate change. They then held climate action conversations, which were essentially focus groups, to delve a little bit deeper into certain topics. And I'll just say that these focus groups were some of the most unique forms of data collection that I've ever seen. I do a lot of qualitative research and do a lot of focus groups, but the liaisons actually led the focus groups and invited people into their homes, offering food and barbecues to hold these conversations about climate change and kind of to incentivize their neighbors getting interested in this topic. We've now moved on to kind of the action phase of the Metro West Climate Equity Project. Through the data collection that happened in 2022, we heard about 4 areas that they wanted their municipalities to take action on. And one of them was to develop and disseminate climate-related emergency communication materials. So that's what we've been doing for the past several months. And you can see below some pictures of our climate liaisons out there in the field. So this action phase has been funded by NACCHO. We were one of 4 grantees that were awarded nationally. And we have been exploring kind of the city and town response to climate emergency events such as flooding and power outages and extreme heat. And then alongside our climate liaisons, we've been co-designing and disseminating communication materials. So we had a really multidisciplinary team that was working on this project. There's a lot of folks that work on emergency management in a municipality, as I'm sure you all know. So we had those folks represented at the table. We had police and health and sustainability and fire departments there. And I would say kind of the backbone of the project was the climate liaisons, the sustainability departments, and us, MAPC. So MAPC, the Public Health Department, hosted a number of workshops with climate liaisons and the municipal partners to explore the concepts of climate change, extreme weather, and emergency preparedness. We asked liaisons about what resources they would need to feel prepared for climate emergencies and what ways they would want to get the word out about climate resilience and emergency preparedness to their communities. We also kind of gave the liaisons some quote unquote homework assignments between the workshops. And one of them was to review their current municipalities' emergency preparedness websites and bring back feedback to us. So we learned that there are a lot of things that the liaisons wanted to prioritize making changes to, including making the websites more visual and highlighting translation options so that they were more, could be accessed more equitably across the folks living in Framingham and Natick. And then we co-designed communication materials. You can see pictured on the right, we did a series of design sprints with them to see what they wanted to include on these communication materials that'd be sent out to their neighbors. So these are the final materials that we sent out. On the bottom left, there's a fridge magnet, and on the right, there is a flyer. And we translated all of these materials into 4 different languages, the languages that were most commonly spoken in Natick and Framingham after English. And they were mailed to 7,000 households that were located in environmental justice neighborhoods in Natick and Framingham. One of the really cool things about this project that I wanted to highlight is through the process of just kind of getting to know the liaisons and building relationships with them, we learned that one of the liaisons was a trained graphic designer and actually had a master's in graphic design back in Brazil. She had recently moved to Framingham and hadn't had a chance to really use those graphic design skills since. And so we asked the liaison to design the materials for us. And so this is really 100% her work. We helped create the content, but she created the visual design for us. And we're really proud of how it turned out. And then we also worked with the municipalities to redesign their websites to increase accessibility. It's a pretty kind of blurry screenshot on the top left, but you can see that Natick's website previously was pretty text heavy, and they have redesigned it to have more visuals and icons and less text. And what I really like is they highlight there's a Google Translate option that residents can click to translate it into really any other language. So it's a much more accessible website than it previously had been. So we hope that this encourages more residents to really make plans for climate emergencies. We sent out those materials in early August, and to kind of have a culminating event with liaisons, we had a celebration. We ordered Chinese food and had a picnic with them, and you can see the liaisons of the municipal partners are pictured on the left-hand side. We also gave them certificates to recognize their contributions to the municipalities. And so this is really an important part of any participatory process that you may be doing with residents, is just to kind of honor and recognize all of their contributions. So we've learned a lot of things through this process, and so I will share a few of our key takeaways as they relate to climate emergency preparedness. One is simplicity is key. The liaisons really made it clear that less is more. Things should be less text heavy and be more visual to increase accessibility. Also, translation is obviously extremely necessary, especially in municipalities that, like Framingham and Natick, where residents speak a diversity of languages. It's also really needed to have multiple communication methods. We didn't just send out the materials via mail, but we also partnered with the Framingham Public Schools to distribute the materials in their digital newsletter. We're also going to be speaking at the Natick Senior Center and distributing the materials then. We also learned from the liaisons that they preferred focusing on the immediate impacts of climate change. It wasn't as effective to talk about climate change as this existential issue. They thought that their family, friends, and neighbors would respond most to thinking about what's impacting them now, whether that be extreme heat or flooding or power outages or anything else. We're also, this past round of communication materials focused on summer climate emergencies, and we're going to be doing this process, another iteration of this process again this winter to focus on winter climate emergencies. A big strength of this project was partnering across municipal departments. As you saw, there are a lot of different players involved. And I think this project really helped kind of create open lines of communications between the departments. Usually fire or police are involved with emergency management, but when it comes to climate emergencies, it's really important to get the sustainability department involved too, which we were able to do here. And then finally, we found that process is a really important outcome in itself. Just the process of building relationships with the residents and across the municipal departments has created just a really strong project team. And so we really just value kind of all the steps that took to get to this point. So with that, thank you all for listening, and I would welcome any questions that you might have. I'll stop sharing.
Thanks so much, Claire. First, congratulations on your recent promotion.
Thank
Very
you.
Exciting.
Thanks so much.
I guess I'll start off with a question, and it's okay because I'm running this meeting today, so I can do that. My question is, so say a community, municipality, or a collection of municipalities is interested in doing something similar, or this kind of work interests them. What kind of advice or recommendations would you give to groups that are interested in this kind of work, but maybe don't have like the financial resources that you had from this size grant? Like, where would be a good place to start?
Yeah, well, one thing that we made sure to do was kind of create those templates of communication materials, and now we're using those to adapt them for different municipalities. So we were funded to make the communication materials for Natick and Framingham, and now are adapting them for Ashland's use as well. So we do have those templates that would be happy to work with different municipalities to adapt to your case as well. But I think that a lot of this work just came from communication across different municipal departments and kind of just creating the dedicated time and space to do that. There's also a lot of resources on MEMA's website, but just making sure that they're highlighted in a way that is accessible to residents and make sure that they know where to find it. That's kind of the biggest issue that we identified, was that residents don't know where to look to find emergency preparedness materials. So making sure that there's something out there that directs residents to a website or communication would be helpful.
And just one quick follow-up before I ask Imai for his question. So do you feel like it was more kind of creating that map, like, you know, that direction of where to find the material, more so than the content material itself was the larger challenge, or the existing challenge that you want to address?
I think it kind of might be a little municipal dependent. In this case, it was a bit of both. And I think the problem that we were trying to solve was how to get residents who aren't traditionally engaged in municipal processes to be aware of the materials. And so that's where that like last finding of like process is an outcome in itself, just through working with liaisons, then they became aware of the resources that were out there. And then they were able to tell their friends, families, and neighbors. And so kind of the networks just increased. So I think a lot of it was kind of that knowledge piece, but by creating the communication materials, we were able to engage the liaisons.
Awesome, thank you. Imai.
Okay, sorry if there's just too much Imai in this meeting for people. I apologize for that. I think you just started to talk about this at the end of your answer there, Claire, is you know, engaging the liaisons themselves. I mean, I think that getting the liaison is a great practice. I think it's been shown to be a best practice to help you get to the community. But I mean, making that initial find of a person who can do that when you don't necessarily know the community.
Yeah.
How did you guys go about that process? I'd like to, hear about that kind of, I mean, just for my own practice.
Of course. So we took kind of a multi-pronged approach, but really tried to activate the community-based organizations that were already doing a lot of this work. And so we reached out to organizations who might be serving residents who weren't as engaged in municipal processes, such as the English as a Second Language program in Framingham. We also kind of reached out to groups that were more focused on climate to see if there are folks interested, but it's kind of become this word of mouth thing. Now that we have a group of liaisons, they're able to tell people that they're engaged in, oh, there's this project. So it's just getting that first partner and kind of doing some of those cold email outreach or warm handoffs if the municipal partner knew another community-based organization. And then it kind of just spread by itself, but really connecting with the ESL program was essential for the success of the project.
Great. Any other questions? Claire, thank you for taking time and sharing. Oh, I'm sorry. And now I'm seeing the hands go up. Sam and Jen, do you want to put it back up? All right, Sam, go ahead.
Well, just very briefly, I was process as an outcome. Never heard that before, but that's, I'm not sure you want to tell a bunch of planners that, but an interesting outcome. Can you just speak briefly about your non-text ways of communicating? Because it seems like text is so 20th century and the world's changed a lot.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that we were necessarily fully successful in that. That's something that we're going to try and do more in the winter communication materials that we're putting out, but that's going to be focused more on like a social media campaign rather than like a flyer that we're sending out via mail. But we heard from the liaisons that especially for those who don't speak English as their first language, it's really important to have icons and videos to explain these like concepts that are kind of heavy. It's just a lot more accessible that way. And then also, as I showed, Natick has now highlighted that there's this Google Translate option available because it was just hidden on the bottom right of their website. And now it's like the top center. So that was really important too. So if there is text, it at least can be translated into the language that they prefer.
Thank you. And Jen.
I think you're on mute, Jen.
Jen. Jen, you're on mute.
Thank you. I'll start over.
Get it.
Can you hear me okay?
Very little.
Is that any better?
Not really.
Okay, I'm going to hold on. I just wanted to say thank you, Claire. This is was an excellent presentation and interesting work. Just I was saying it's a great reminder that sometimes as either planners or town leadership that we may not always be the best resource to getting deeper into the community in terms of communication and education. So these the sort of out of the box concepts that you utilized, I think are fascinating. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Jen. And we heard you. So that's great. All right. Any other questions, comments? Well, I'll thank you again, Claire. Thank you for taking your time and sharing your talents and the great work on this project. It was obviously very engaging and very informative. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Next up on the agenda, I think I'm going to call on Mark for this. It could be Lizzie. Which one? Well, we'll start with Mark. Preparation for various upcoming events.
So it actually should be Eric Hove, but I don't think that Eric is on the screen. And I've texted him, I haven't heard back. So he may join us at any moment. We have a kind of a party month coming up. Tomorrow, hard to believe, our 60th anniversary celebration. Tomorrow evening at the late afternoon at the Foundry in Cambridge. Carolyn Crockett the the author of People Before Highways, and also a professor of planning at MIT, and an individual who held both economic development and equity positions in the Marty Walsh administration, will be our keynote speaker. She will be doing some retrospection, but she will also be speaking about the future. I'm just telling Eric that, yes, he should join us. So, okay. So that is tomorrow. I hope that all of you will be in attendance. I know a few of you have explained you have other commitments, and that's totally fine. But if you haven't RSVP'd yet, please do. We would love to see you. We have 300 RSVPs. I don't know if that means we have 300 guests, but it does mean it's going to be a great networking opportunity. And looks like the weather's going to be good. And the Foundry is a lovely space if you haven't been there. So that is tomorrow on the 27th, I believe. Lizzie will correct me if I've got my date wrong. We have an event across town in Cambridge at the Dante Alighieri Center, which is for alumni of the MAPC staff, going back for many years. There's Eric. Eric has been helping to spearhead both of these events together with Hannah Gaffman, our Assistant Director of Arts and Culture. The alumni event is for former staff. It is a bit of a less formal event than the event tomorrow. But Andrea Campbell, our Attorney General, and perhaps arguably our most famous alumna, at least at the moment, will be joining us and will be offering some remarks on the 27th. That is not open to the council as a whole, but any member of the board who wishes to join us. You will see many friends at that event, and especially if you're unable to join us on the 21st, but would like to come on the 27th, please do, and Eric can let you know how to accomplish that. I'm going to pause there, still have one more event to talk about in October, the council meeting, but I want to see if Eric has anything further to add.
Thanks. Good morning. Nice to see everybody. Afternoon, I guess it is. I missed the first part, so hopefully I'm not repeating anything, but tomorrow's event I think is going to be great. We have like over 300 folks signed up. Carolyn Crockett is going to be the keynote speaker. So we're very excited about that. And it's really an open house style event. So we'll have, I think, 8 different stations, including an MAPC timeline that's interactive, and the stations featuring our work, some of our initiatives that are staffed by MAPC staff. So the first hour is really networking, open house. We have about a 50-minute speaking program. And then the last hour is also open house style. The food I'm excited about the food. It's Las Palmas. It's a Dominican restaurant, and I think it started in Rosendale, but they're now in Cambridge. Very excited for that. And we will have a cash bar as well. The only couple things I wanted to add on the alumni and staff event for next week, the 27th. I don't know if Mark mentioned this, but we do have live entertainment for the last hour and a half. It's former Mayor Joe Curtatoni's band, the Green Freaks. It's supposed to be R&B, soul, disco. I really can't wait to see this. It's already been a trip coordinating this all with Mayor Joe, and have a few special alumni guests coming from out of town, across the country even. So looking forward to reconnect with some of those folks. And I think you probably know how much MAPC loves Herrera's down the street. That's where we're doing the catering for the alumni event, because it makes sense. It's our favorite restaurant. So I think that's all I have, but hope you can make one, if not both of the events.
Great.
And I will just note that Mayor Curtatoni has texted me more times in the past few weeks than even during the early days of COVID, when we talked 3 or 4 times a day to get song requests and see what it would take to get Mark Drazen on the dance floor. So please come and see if that happens.
It would take more than any of you have.
On the dance floor, the mic.
I wanted to thank Eric. Eric's been doing a tremendous amount of work on this, and Hannah, even though I know she's not on the screen at the moment. Both are going to be great events. And not to be underwhelmed, but we do have a council meeting coming up on the 26th of October, currently planned as virtual, although there are some circumstances under which we might make it in person. We do not yet have a keynote speaker for that event, but we will be doing the MAN Award for regional leadership at that event with the MAN family. As you know, we always do, usually in the fall. Nominations are open for that. I think you have all received them. Please
I don't think
nominate.
they have yet, Mark.
No, not yet.
I was planning to send out that information today after this meeting, after we
Okay,
mentioned
great.
it here.
All right, so that will be forthcoming. Please nominate municipal staff or elected officials who you feel have demonstrated regional leadership. The list of award recipients is really quite an MVP list for the Greater Boston region, and we hope to add to it at this fall's event. I think that's it on the upcoming events. Erin?
Okay. Thank you all for updating on the upcoming month of celebrations. Very exciting. So at this time, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda, which is again the minutes from August 16th, 2023, and the treasurer's report, the financial statement from June 23.
So moved.
Motion made by Colette, second made by
Second.
Tom Daniel. I know lots of people wanted to participate there. I appreciate that. Motion, I'm going to say, has been made by Colette and seconded by Tom Daniel. Thank you for that. And at this time, we're going to take that vote. If you could come off mute. And Keith, I've added you back onto the roster alphabetically, so congrats. All right, here we go. Ready? Imai.
Aye.
Colette.
Aye.
Kurt. Keith.
Aye.
Karen.
Aye.
Jen.
Aye.
Tom Daniel.
Aye.
John DePriest. Tom G.
Aye.
Mo.
Aye.
Diego. Lagoon. Jared.
Aye.
Tabor.
Aye.
Angie, Gina.
Aye.
Steve Olenoff.
Aye.
Courtney. Vandana.
Aye.
Claire is not here. Sam.
Aye.
Steve S.
Aye.
Juan.
Aye.
Elaine.
Aye.
And Erin. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much. Mark and or Lizzie, is there any other business not known at the time of the posting of this agenda?
I have nothing.
Oh, imagine that. All right. And Lizzie, you good? All right. And look at that, 5 minutes early, just like riding a bike. All right. And with that, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Who motioned that? I wasn't.
Me, Imai.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mai. And a second, please.
Second.
All right. Thank you, Mo. I was waiting for you. I was looking at you. That's why I got confused with Imai there. Okay. Motion made by Imai to adjourn and second made by Mo on that motion. Okay. If there's no other questions or comments, everyone come off mute, please. For the roll call vote. Imai.
Aye.
Colette.
Aye.
Kurt. Keith.
Aye.
Karen.
Aye.
Jen.
Aye.
Tom D.
Aye.
John. Tom G.
Aye.
Mo.
Aye.
Diego. Sagoon. Jared.
Aye.
Tabor.
Aye.
Angie. Gina.
Aye.
Steve O. Courtney. Vandana.
Aye.
Claire. Sam.
Aye.
Steve S.
Aye.
Juan.
Aye.
Elaine,
Aye.
and Erin, aye. And with that, the meeting is adjourned at 12:57 p.m. Thank you all so much. I hope to see you all tomorrow at the 60th anniversary celebration in Cambridge. And with that, have a good day.
Bye-bye.